Welcome to the I Will Restore Executive Life and Leadership Coaching and Consulting podcast. This is the music that we're using for the opening for this particular idea that we're working with today. It is entitled Awareness of Vision that we're using it is one of the 8 A's, the first of the 8 A's, and is talking about awareness. Awareness is the word that begins our 8 A's for the simple reason that what we're talking about is awakening to a new set of thoughts, coming forth with a new idea, a new vision. And that can happen every day. It can happen every moment of one's life. And this idea that we have, we've connected it with the entire uh, number of various theories, as we call them. And when we say theories, understand that when a person speaks of theories, many times you can have something that, like there's a Bible verse where God says, "Prove me now herewith, saith the Lord of hosts, if I will not open you the windows of heaven and pour you out a blessing, there will not be room enough to receive it." God is not speaking of the aspect, the Spirit is not speaking of the aspect that it is not proven to someone else. It has been proven to someone else. Someone else may have done exactly what you're called to do, and it may be your first time. What Spirit is saying is try it in your own life. It's not true for you, or it's not true for you until you've actually practiced it. That's what's being talked about here. It is the aspect when you speak of a theory, it could have worked for any number of other people, but until you actually go through the actual process of bringing it forth in one's individual life, it's still a theory to you. And so there have been rooms where I walked into and an individual says, "Don't believe a word I say." And what they're basically saying is that what we're going to say may seem strange to your mind, may seem strange based on what you've been taught before. And therefore, the best thing to do is to actually try it and not just try it, but commit to making it work for you. And that's the same thing that comes into play in regard to what we're talking about, because we're saying that it's possible that principle can actually make it so that precedent does not control one's life. In other words, your future can be different from what your past has been. And so the idea is that you begin to paint a new vision because you have a new identity of who you are. And so there's a whole new set of ideas and opportunities and what is possible for you. You have a whole new set. And when you look in history, you can see a number of people who've done that over the course of the years. Of course, one of the greatest examples of that, and there are great examples of that, but we've celebrated the aspect of the career of a person named Serena Williams and her sister Venus Williams, who celebrated her career, that entire career and what she achieved. But that was born out of a vision of possibilities. A man had a vision for his children, had a vision for his children who were yet unborn, and then he scripted, or if we do the 4 Ds, we would say that he had a desire for his children who were yet unborn. And then he scripted a plan. It became definite. He wrote it down as to how to bring it about. In business, that would be a business plan, so to speak. But and you can say that for that as well. And then he dreamed it, or it became divinely inspired. It fit in with what else was going on in the world. And then he kept dreaming it, divinely inspired. And then he went about it, keeping it in his mind over and over again. He felt it was destiny, and then it was lived out. So it's the same idea that we're working with. So we will begin with the aspect of awareness, awakening to it. And so that's what we're doing here. This particular book that I'm speaking of today is called The Dynamic Laws of Prosperity. The Dynamic Laws of Prosperity. And it is one of the ways that one can begin to look at dreaming about something new. Dreaming about something new. A motivation for a new life can come because you recognize that prosperity is just another way of speaking of a new life, prosperity. You may have the aspect of looking at what is prosperity and everything in regard to that. And individuals have been taught sometimes that money is the root of all evil. The thing doesn't say that. The biblical statement doesn't say that. It says the love of money is the root of all evil. The love of money is the root of all evil. And what it's saying is that you place something above one's love for spirit, one's love for God, all of those kinds of things. And the aspect is the love of money. It's not, you're not invited to become attached to anything, but to become attached to spirit, to become attached to the idea that God, who is immaterial, God is not a being, God is not a thing, God is God. Beyond explanation, really, beyond the ability to categorize God in any box that one may try to fit God in, because God is infinite and God is principle. God is principle. And I said to someone that God is beyond E equals MC squared. God is beyond E equals MC squared. And so that E equals MC squared is almost like one way that one can see God and understand God, because God can be energy. And you can look at it from that particular standpoint. But God can also show up, and indeed does show up. Nature declares, the text says, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament shows his handiwork. So nature is this firmament, this firm. And you can look sometimes at the mountains, and you can look at the skies and the stars, and all of that. The firmament shows his handiwork. So you begin to get an appreciation for the divine as a result of paying attention to the stars. All of these kinds of things are involved there. So you get an appreciation of beauty when you look at the arrangement of different things, the auroras and all of these kinds of things, the northern lights and all of this. You begin to get an appreciation for spirit in regard to that. And that's what the psalmist was talking about. And so you get an appreciation for order as well. The arrangement of things, all of this, you get an appreciation for it in the divine. Now, that's from particular disposition, let me say it that way, point of view, let me say it that way. But you can do the aspect of considering God from the aspect of trying to mathematically, if you will, lay out who God is and how God works. Because I just looked at something that was talking about the different telescopes that are in the skies, or in the heavens, or in the stratosphere, if that is the word to properly use there. It was talking about the Webb telescope and the Hubble's telescopes and others. I think there's one named the James telescope as well. And they were talking about the aspect that there are galaxies beyond, of course, the Milky Way galaxy, which I think is the one that we are a part of, and the solar system. But the Milky Way galaxy is the one that we are a part of on this earth, as I understand. I may have that wrong. You can check me on that. But at any rate, these telescopes are taking pictures and sending them back to the Earth. That's an amazing mathematical equation that's been worked out there. It is amazing because it is taking these pictures and sending it back. And you look at that, and you're able to get an understanding of the wonder of God. Because at some point in time, when there was no telescope, people thought the Earth was the center of the universe, the center of the galaxy, and they had in mind that everything moved around the earth. In other words, it was a solar centered universe, so to speak. But now we know that the sun is the center of these 9 planets, this solar system, as we call it. And then there are other planets. There's the Milky Way galaxy. In other words, there are the suns, if you will, that have stars, if you will. and understanding how that fits together. But beyond that, there are additional galaxies. And so this is an amazing thing to learn and to understand. And so these telescopes are actually plotting and taking pictures of the birthing of stars. And these stars, I take it, are millions of years old, at least if I read it correctly. And I was just sitting and looking at that and considering the aspect that at one point in my life I began to look at a show that was on television. There were a number of shows that dealt with stars and star travel, all of this kind of stuff. And one was Star Trek, and Star Trek was about a federation of planets. And then over the course of time, and I wondered as I sat there, because now we have planes and we have Navy pilots who's, as I understand it, have been able to see what would be considered UFOs, or unidentified flying objects in the sky that were moving at the speed of either 4 to 20 Mach, which means it was 4 times the speed of sound, I believe it is. And they were moving that fast, 4 to 20 times the speed of sound, and moving in such a way that it indicated intelligence controlling those. And this is amazing. But even our particular, in the US and in other parts of the world, the instruments that we have that are in the sky, these instruments, these planes, they are amazing. They are amazing. I don't fly one. I've had an opportunity to talk with a pilot about what he does. It's amazing, and you can see the movie. I think it's called Top Gun. There's Top Gun 1, Top Gun 2. This whole piece in regard to that, that's amazing to me, because it has a mathematical formula to it. Well, God is certainly as smart as the pilot that flies it, in my estimation, and the engineers who designed it, all of those kinds of things. So that comes into play for me when it comes to this kind of thing that we're working with in regard to that. And so prosperity is the understanding that God has an intelligence that is beyond all that we see in nature, including human intelligence. Does that make sense? I hope so. It makes sense to me. And so when we talk about prosperity, it is so much more than when we talk about just simply money. And prosperity has to do with health, has to do with health. That's why in the biblical record, and that's just one, in my estimation, again, of the spiritual traditions. There are others, and they all equally say, to some degree, this aspect about health and prosperous, and because they're looking to the aspect of the human, that's another common factor of all the spiritual tradition. They're looking to the aspect of health, and in the biblical statement, it says, I would that thou would prosper and be in health. And so, this aspect that we're working with here, when we speak of prosperity, it has to do with health, being healthy in body and being healthy in mind, or being healthy in mind and being healthy in body. And that translates to the aspect of a healthy individual. And then the other aspects of the individual comes after healthy in mind, healthy in spirit, mind, and body. And those things flow out of one's being healthy first in spirit, healthy in mind, healthy in the body, flows out of that, or the physical flows out of that. And then the body of affairs flows out of that. So this is the aspect. And you may say, well, you're just speaking of spiritual things. No, that's not it. My parents would say a fish rots from the head down. And when you apply that to an organization, it is still the truth. As I've said before, individuals who are thinkers within their organization are normally called the CEOs of the organization. They are the chief operating officers, they are the thinkers in the organization, the leaders in the organization. There's a whole set of individuals that speak on this. But let me mention one again. The individual that I read called The Seven Habits of Highly Effective People was a man named Stephen Covey. I think there's an individual who's done something like this in this day and time, maybe a few years ago. Simon Sinek, I believe is Sinek. EK, perhaps. I may have that wrong, but he did a TED talk, if I remember correctly, where he talked about those individuals who are early adopters of various ideas, theories, whatever it may be. And he talks about them and why they are considered leaders wherever they are. They are early adopters. They get things that are put out first, and they are early adopters. So you can look those kind of things up. Just use some search engine and you'll be able to see that as well. Early adopters, as he called them. And then he had categorized various early adopters who followed them, who followed them, who followed them, all of these kinds of things. And so I would that thou would prosper and be in health. So let me look at uh, the book. It was written 1984. This is now 2022. And so the idea that we're working with is that your mind has the ability to bring you what the Jewish statement is, uh, translated in English, is the word shalom or prosperity, that whole aspect of I would that thou would prosper and be in peace. And so her statement, her introduction begins, there's gold dust in the air for you. She says, this book is a result of several recent recessions. There's always this threat that we're either in a period of inflation and we're in a period of near recession, all of this. But she said, 1984, this book is a result of several recent recessions and many years of lean living. Nobody likes recession and nobody likes lean living, and indeed nobody should like them. For 15 years, I tried such a book to find such a book as this one. During those years of searching the bookshelves, I found there are many books which give various success ideas, but in none of them did I find a set of compact, simple laws for assuring success. She says assuring success. She's going to go on, but what she's saying is she's looking for something that's already proven, and there's something to assure success. That's what a principle. You want something that assures success. She says, I began searching for such a book as this after having been widowed and left with a small son to rear and educate. Since I had no training for work and no means of income, listen to her situation, because it is often that an individual is in a desperate, somewhat, it seems, desperate situation. And what she describes is that I had no training for work and I had no means of income. I would have given anything to have known then about the power of prosperous thinking. Notice I said earlier the aspect of understanding that thinking creates your life. She calls this idea of thinking, not Dennis Waters, but she calls this idea of thinking the power of prosperous thinking. For a while, I experienced depression, ill health, loneliness, financial lack, and a sense of complete failure. That's one way of thinking. It seemed that the whole world was against me and that everything I did went wrong. But with my son to provide for, I could not settle for failure. I had to succeed for his sake as well as for my own. Finally, when I was at my lowest ebb emotionally, physically, and financially, remember she was a widow, her husband had died, and she had a son. So, motivation. When I was at my lowest ebb emotionally, physically, and financially, mentally, emotionally, body wise, physically, and financially. Lois Ebb. I learned about the power of thought as an instrument for success or failure. Now, this is powerful because what comes in is that you have the choice. You, as an individual, have the choice. You can choose to set your mind to determine. You can choose every day, every moment of your life for success or failure based on your thoughts. I came to realize that failure is basically the result of failure thinking. Now, please hear me. This moves beyond the aspect that whether you think somebody is for or against you, whether you're black, white, green, yellow, blue, it doesn't matter. She says, and again, remember what I said, that when it comes to thinking, the aspect is that you have control of your thinking. If you there's so many books that are written on the aspect that it doesn't matter if you're locked away in prison somewhere, you have control of your thinking. That's demonstrated by the various discussions about the Holocaust and other things, the situation in South Africa during apartheid, all of these kinds of things. You have control of your thinking if you take control of your thinking. And we're not just talking about consciously thinking, and we are talking about consciously thinking, but we're talking about programming your subconscious mind. Programming, just like programming a computer, but more than programming a computer, programming your mind. That's what we're talking about here. This is not something you do uh, from the standpoint of you do it once and it's done, or it's not magic. It's that people want magic, like snap their fingers and something happens. No, that's not this at all. You didn't get where you are as a result of snapping your fingers. You may have, that's what awareness is about, by the way. Awareness can happen in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye. You see something and you are in a new experience. That's a moment. But that's why we have 8 A's and not 1 A. That's why we have awareness. You wake up, but now you got to live. You're born again, as the Bible says, but now you got to live. There's a process. But here is the wonder of awareness. Here is a wonder of awareness. And it's written in the book, The Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. And Stephen Covey, when he wrote the book, actually had an eighth habit. And this is the truth about the eighth habit. The first habit, the first step in the 8 A's, acceptance, is related to the eighth step. Hear me when I say this. The eighth step is assimilation. But you see this when anybody goes through the whole aspect of um, completing the program of study of anyway. Notice that when you go to school, you begin school and say you go through and get a 4 year degree or any degree. At the end of it, you have a commencement. If you look up the word commencement, it means you end and you begin. If you look at breathing, you have an inhale and then you have an exhale. But guess what you do after you exhale? You begin again. At awareness, you have a vision of the end. And as soon as you get to the end, you can celebrate for a minute, a second, better, or a few seconds, or whatever you want to call it. But you begin again. You begin again. That's the wonder of awareness. That's the wonder of awareness. And so, this aspect, and when it's spoken about inside of the biblical record, it says born again. The Apostle Paul said, I die daily. That's a mature. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. All of those things. And that's what we help individuals to come to understand. And this works from the standpoint of a business individual so that they have a new vision for their business, a new vision for their business, a new vision, a new idea. It may be simply developing a new product or a new service, or a new way to serve a new group of individuals. It could be anything, but some kind of way you come up with something new and you come to the point that you realize that it's possible to get to assimilation. We have 8 steps that work with this, that take you through a process because it's mystery, but it's not magic. It's mystery. It seems magical when you do it. When you get to the end, you will look at it when you. The song says, when you look back, you say, I wonder how I got over. You'll know how you got over if you journal your journey. And so this whole aspect. But listen to her beginning. Finally, when I was at my lowest ebb emotionally, physically, and financially, I learned about the power of thought as an instrument for success or failure. I came to realize that failure is basically the result of failure thinking. Now, you might think with this person that, I mean, couldn't I just stay in failure? Couldn't I just stay in failure? I mean, after all, I'm a widow. I don't know how to work or do any work. Uh, I have ill health. I'm experiencing depression. I'm lonely. I don't have finances. And I actually feel like a complete failure. So, don't I have the right, so to speak, to feel the way that I'm feeling? Well, it's not a matter of whether you have the right. You can choose to do what you want, that's your choice. But what she discovered was that I have a choice. And she discovered that she had a love for her son and a desire for him to have a better life. And she also wanted a better life for herself. So, one of the first things you need to do is to have the need or the desire for a better life. That's the first thing. To get some kind of way discontent with the way things are. And also, it becomes important to not blame. She could have said, like, to her husband that died, like, why did you leave me in this mess? She said, I came to realize that failure is basically the result of failure thinking. I learned that the right use of my mind, notice the next step, I learned that the right use of my mind could become the key to healthy, happy, prosperous, successful living. And as soon as I grasped this wonderful success secret, the tide began to change. As soon as you wake up to the idea, the tide changes. The direction changes. Everything changes. Meditate on that a little bit. Play a little bit more of this awareness of vision, and then we will continue with this. Now, we're asking that you send us an email at admin, ADMIN, at real, REL, coach, COACH.com. And we want what we do to be a benefit to you. We have tools, techniques. Our very conversation with you is filled with life. Because we teach, we show individuals how to move from the idea of being a victim to what has happened to them to be a victor, to move into a new future. We consult with organizations to help them to move indeed into a new future for the organization by helping them to construct a vision, a strategy, and to move forward into all of this. And so it's not just an individual. We go through an entire process. We walk along beside you. We have so many tools. We begin at the beginning, at awareness, or at any step along the path that you've already worked out. And walk along beside you. Take care. God bless. Become aware.